and always have been in need of repair. If you came out to this park maybe in the 40s or 50s or 60s, it didn't have all the nice grass. In fact, it was known as kind of a dusty place where people came out to play softball and have company picnics. So anyway, we're very grateful to the county parks for providing this nice venue for Jane's memorial. So thank you for being here. So what I want to do now is just give you a short bio of Jane, about her life. Jane was born Jane Eleanor Sherwood in a town just north of Detroit called Royal Oak. It was really a small town USA. In fact, it's been picked as a movie's location for that very need, small town USA. She went to high school there, graduated in 1955. She was in the top 10% of her class. She was accepted at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, but her father wouldn't support her in going to college. So she also received a scholarship for the nursing school at Henry Ford Hospital, and that's in downtown Detroit. So she went there, graduated in nursing in 1958, and had a number of very close friends who were roommates. They all had rooms at the hospital. They were there full time. In fact, really not allowed out because it wasn't safe in that part of Detroit, even as early as 1955. So when they graduated, they really wanted to get out of Detroit and out of the area and to be on their own. So Jane had a circle of nursing friends, about 6 of them, that decided they would stay in Detroit for 1 year, take hospital jobs, save their money, and then go west and see the United States. That they did. They packed up their cars with their parents' old umbrella tents and their old sleeping bags, and headed west. And they took a route that took them through a number of national parks on the way west. They took their time, made it slow, and kind of worked their way all the way across the country to California. When they got to LA, they decided they would keep going on to Hawaii. Took passage on a boat, and they went to Hawaii, stayed there actually like 3 or 4 months, stayed quite a while, until they were kind of short of money, and then came back to San Francisco. There were, I guess, 4 women doing this, 3 other nurses plus Jane, and a couple of them went back to Detroit to get jobs here, to earn money again, and then returned to California. So all of them ended up staying in California, and all met their husbands in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And Jane met her first husband there. He was a Dutchman. His name was Paul de Bruin. And they actually lived in Haight-Ashbury. Jane could always get a job wherever she went as a nurse. And usually they'd ask her, "Are you ready to start today or tomorrow?" And so her husband liked to move around. He worked, I think, as an electronic technician, mostly on boats, like fishing boats and so on. So they stayed in the San Francisco Haight-Ashbury for just for about 2 years, and then decided to go up to Coos Bay, Oregon, where there were, I think, more jobs for him fixing radios on fishing boats. So they moved to Coos Bay. They lived there a few years. Same thing with Jane. She immediately got her hospital job, and there was a smaller hospital there. They asked her to run training classes for other nurses on the new equipment they were planning to get while she was in Coos Bay. They were there just a couple years, and it was her husband's plan to move around where he felt he could get the best work. So they moved from there to back to LA. They lived in Hollywood for a while, and then the Los Feliz neighborhood, which is over near the back of Griffith Park. And then from there moved to San Diego. And and I think that's maybe where a few of you first met them, the Maxteds in particular. I know. I think they lived out on Point Loma for a while, didn't they, Don?
We met them in
In Ocean Beach, or yeah. And from there, I think moved to La Mesa, and there they started a stained glass studio. One of Jane's big interests and talents was design in shape and form, and also in color. She really liked working with different colors. So they opened a stained glass studio, gave classes, also made a lot of big stained glass windows for a variety of company headquarters and this and that. I did that for, I don't know how many years. Don probably knows better than I do. But about 5 or 6 years or less in La Mesa. Don? Something like that.
Right.
And so they also had moved to La Mesa, very close to the old center of La Mesa, the La Mesa Springs shopping center that was later demolished for a new shopping center. While they were there, I think it was Jane's idea, maybe Don knows better, to organize and plan a big event called the Victorian Fair. This was a venture that they did in Descanso. It was a place called Stallion Ranch there, I believe, a big private ranch. But anyway, they had to, I guess, plan and design all the events that would be there. I know Don and Jan participated. They ran a booth that makes steak sandwiches. They did a lot of cooking in Descanso. Famous steak sandwiches. So that was a very big enterprise. I don't know if they made any money out of it. It was a lot of work, I know.
Nobody made any
No one
money.
made money there. Okay. So, well, anyway, shortly after that, and living in La Mesa, I think she and her husband were separated and then divorced, and of course Jane is working in hospitals all this time, and she, on her own, moved to Alpine, lived there a few years, and it was about that point in time that Jane and I met. And I think it was about 1983. Also, thanks to the Maxteds. At one time, I think the occasion was they were attending a concert, I believe in Encinitas. I can't remember the place, but they had tickets and invited me, and also invited Jane, who I didn't know. I was thinking about inviting a new teacher of my school who was teaching that was single and was looking for activity, but fortunately I did not. So that's where I met Jane, and I think Jan mentioned that as we walked back to our cars from that concert, Jane and I were holding hands. That was the first.
Wow.
So at that point I was making a lot of Baja trips with most of you. Had invited Jane on a number of those trips, and that was our bonding. And she had her own little separate house in Lakeside at that time. She moved there from Alpine after we met, or about the time we met. And so I lived in Mira Mesa. We were kind of going back and forth quite a bit. And also a lot of Baja trips, and I had my Mesa Grande property up there quite a bit. So anyway, that's sort of became our routine, going back and forth and doing a lot of Baja trips. But then she retired from nursing, and I retired from teaching. I got a golden handshake so I could do it early, thinking that would extend my lifespan. I think the actuary table said that the average time the teacher lived after retirement was 7 years. And, so I figured I better get out of there, because that happened to be exactly the number of years my mother lived after retiring as a primary grade teacher in city schools. So I feel very fortunate I was able to get out of teaching and be on my own, and that happened to be in '91. So I've been retired for 30 years or more. And that is also the length of time that Jane and I were together before her passing, which was July 24th of this summer. So Jane had always impressed me as a woman that that had her own mind. She had a very strong will, a very strong-willed lady, and was not afraid of letting people know of her opinions and what they should, how they should be doing their lives. And I had to kind of stand back. That was especially true in our kitchen. I was always persona non grata in the kitchen. I had to stay out of there and into the living room or somewhere with the dogs while she was fixing the meals. And that was the way she functioned. Well, when I retired, then we decided we better start living together. So her house in Lakeside was too small. Mine in Mira Mesa was a very busy area. And both being retired, we could really live anywhere. Friends recommended that we check out Prescott, Arizona as a very popular place to retire. In fact, it was rated #1 in Money Magazine in '91 when I retired. So we made a trip there, looked around. It was already a boom town. I mean, it had all the big box stores and traffic jams downtown, and all the good old properties were already taken up. So we kept going, made a trip to the Navajo Reservation. But in going both ways, to and from that part of Arizona, we passed through this little town of Yarnell, which is between Prescott and Wickenburg. And this little town was very small, small in population. In fact, it looked a little bit like Dogpatch, USA, to tell you the truth. A lot of falling down little buildings, mostly retirees and artists. But that area is surrounded by the same big granitic rocks that you see behind me, large boulder piles, just like all of us are well acquainted with in the back country of San Diego, and also down through the Sierra Juarez in Baja California, through the Sierra San Pedro Mark here in Baja, and other ranges that form pretty much the backbone of the entire Baja Peninsula. These same granitic rocks. And by the way, I always say granitic, never granite, because you just can't take anything for granted. It comes in a big variety of types. And if you use the word granite, that's a specific recipe of minerals, which we don't have in the western states. There are almost no true granites in our western states. It's often granodiorite, which is like most of the stuff behind me, or tonalite, which is also right around us, a little bit beyond the granodiorite. We have some metamorphic rocks, which if you look to the north of where you sit, you can see mountains at all. You'll notice that all kinds of big boulder outcrops behind me, but behind that tree there are none. Plenty of mountain there, but it's all brush with no boulder outcrops. That's because it's a different rock. Those are metamorphic rocks that form the seabed of an ancient mid-Jurassic sea basin, which the magma, which is the granitic rocks, came up beneath when it intruded that sea basin in the late Jurassic. So we get a geology lesson as well as memorial here. So we're fortunate to have a big variety of geology and elevations in San Diego County, and consequently, as many of you know, especially Mike Kelly, I see back there, it makes for the biggest variety of habitats for wildlife of really any place in the United States, because of our differences in elevation, our differences from the coast, so on and so on. Many habitats to be seen here. Well, I diverge. So I better get back to Jane. Some other interests of Jane's besides her design was, also related designs. She had taken an interest in beads, beading necklaces and earrings and all that. Except she didn't really like to make necklaces. She liked to design them. And she noticed that if a person wanted to do beading, there were no books available on how to do it, how-to books. So she set about making her own craft books and publish them. And she would make all the jewelry designs and then give it to a little old lady that lived next door that liked to do beading. Gave her also a big magnifier so she could see them. And she would produce the prototype of that particular piece of jewelry, give it back to Jane. until she had all of her designs done for that particular book. Then she passed those designs to Belle Everts, who is also here today as a professional photographer and special photographer for the Natural History Museum. Well, he would make photos of those in color and then pass them back to Jane to do the color separations, which was the process in those days, to send to the printer to publish the books. Well, they turned out to be very successful because she was the only one in that market at the time. And so she did a second one, and a third one, and a fourth one, and a fifth one, and a sixth one, and a seventh one, an eighth one, and a ninth one. I think it was 9 altogether. And in the first several that she did, she went through many printings of 10,000 each, and they sold. But eventually, like most crafts, I think most crafts tend to be a fad for a while, and then it dies down. And also in the case of that business, Michaels had moved in, and they didn't buy from others. They only had certain distributors. So anyway, that business kind of slowed down, and so she went in some other enterprise, and the next one happened to be hot sauces and salsas. And, she got interested in that on a trip we made, believe it or not, to Detroit, to Royal Oak, and there was a little store in that town similar to our Trader Joe's, similar line of, but they had a big center aisle. It was all hot sauce and salsa, and they had really fancy labels on them, multicolor, pictures of guys with steam coming out of their ears and their nose and flames on fire. And she was attracted to those labels, I think, more than the salsa. So when we go back to San Diego, we decided to go to a trade show called the Fiery Food Show. That would be in Albuquerque that year. Traveled there, and then she saw all the varieties available and all the fancy labels, and decided that was for her. So she ordered small cases of each of those varieties, and then I restored an old building up in Ramona as her hot shop, and I was selling from there. And then from there up to San Isabel, restored an old gas station and so on. And also started importing Mexican pottery to go with the hot sauce and salsa. So it was kind of one thing after another, and that is really what enabled her to get out of nursing and be on her own. So she had retired. Well, some other interests of Jane were travel. She also really liked to work on genealogy, and she had a talent for that on her computer and the various websites. And so she used that to do her own family's genealogy, and didn't take long. And then one morning it started on mine, and so because of her, I know now my background in genealogy, and she knows hers, which went back to Scotland. And so we made several trips to Scotland to find out where our early ancestors lived and so on. She'd like to do that. We both liked Scotland. And then my daughter Johanna, at about that time, got married, and she was working for United Airlines as a hostess. And at that time, the America's Cup was going on in New Zealand. New Zealand had captured it from San Diego, and when New Zealand got it, they really worked that to their advantage. For San Diego, when we had it, it just sat in the San Diego Yacht Club's center room in a showcase, and most people, San Diegans, didn't even know it was there, let alone the yacht club people. We really didn't take advantage of it. But Auckland, which in some ways is like San Diego, it has a giant bay, and that bay has many smaller bays around it. It has dozens of tiny volcanoes which make little islands around that bay. So they had one bay that was really right in the center of the town that was old falling down oil docks and shipbuilding places and so on. They completely ripped that out and redid it, designed a walkway and areas for hotels and restaurants. They call it America's Cup Village. And that became a real focus for the city of Auckland to attract many tourists and people from abroad. So while the America's Cup was going, Johanna was flying very regularly to Auckland, and it's a 13-hour flight, so the crews get to have an extra day or two to stay there. And they stay usually in the Sheraton Hotel. That's where all the syndicates for the Mariska boats also stay. Each boat is backed by a syndicate that is backed by like a half a dozen different companies that pump the money into it to get free advertising by having a boat. And while Johanna was there, she met who's now her husband, Clive. He was the marketing manager there of the Sheraton. And so he, every time they would fly to New Zealand, he would invite Johanna out on the committee boat, you know, that goes out in the bay with the boats when they do their races and also the practicing. And they got to know each other quite well. And so Johanna always had an invitation to be shown around Auckland when she got there from one of her flights to Malay. And Clive took her down to meet his family in Fielding, which is south central North Island. And eventually they were married. And my oldest grandson is here today. You've probably met Max. He's standing up behind that camera where he's been taking still shots of everyone here today. And he's going to be doing a video also, or is doing the video, I guess, at the moment, which he'll put on YouTube, and that can be downloaded by any of you. And also Jane's brother, who lives in North Carolina. So that's one of the main purposes. We also did that at the memorial we did in Arizona. So thank you, Max, for driving down today and doing that. Mm-hmm. And Max's friend Maddie is also here, sitting there's the white jacket beside Max. They both go to college together. They're classmates at a college in Riverside. So Max has stayed behind while the rest of the family went back to New Zealand, where they have purchased their a new house, actually a new old house built in 1874. I think I was telling Mike, and that'll be there as far as they know, their permanent home. But he's able to do, I think, most of his work online, doing marketing, and they have a base camp here also in California, in Claremont, Ontario area. So both Dana and I are retired for quite a while, and that gave us an opportunity to do a lot of things that we always wanted to do. So I feel lucky because of my relationship with Jane that we had that opportunity to have freedom to get around and do the things we like to do. Jane also had many talents that I don't have, especially online talents using her computer. She got very interested in photography with her digital camera that I don't know how to work. And with that and her computer, she could use Photoshop and various things and blow up the better of her photographs. And so our house now in both Lakeside and Yarnell, Arizona, there's no more wall space, all covered with framed pictures, which she did a very good job with, and probably most of you have seen. So many memories that all of us have of Jane at our house for Christmas parties in Arizona, visits to their Baja trips, other parties at other houses like Bill Everett's with his famous parties in Christmas season as well, and Baja people that like to gather together. So thank you, Bill, for doing all those parties and all that work, and Sue, who really knows how to do it. Thank you, Bill. So the memories of Jane are really what stick with us. You know, that's the real Jane. That's the spiritual Jane. The temporal Jane has left us, and but her thoughts, her memory, her mark on all of us and the places we go to are very vivid, and will certainly remain vivid with all of us for a long time. So the physical Jane is gone, but the spiritual Jane will stay with us forever and ever. So I'd like to thank you again for coming, and you're also welcome to to partake of the food. But before we do that, I want to have Wendy come up. Wendy?
Thank you, Don. I want to thank everybody for coming. We've been really excited to have this event and see everybody together. And I want to thank Jan and Martha for all the work with the flowers, and Sue for doing all the invitations, and for Chris and Drew who did the beautiful poster and all the printing up here, and Brian for help staying last night with Dawn, making sure that everything got set up this morning, and just all the other help that people gave. And please, we have a lot of these personalized seed packages. Please take one.
That'd be nice.
Yeah, and also these great photos of Don and Jane that Chris had printed, and memory cards that Drew did, as well as the poster. So Don asked me to read this to you because he and Jane really felt this way about a journey after she left everybody here. There is no death. I am standing at the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails in the morning breeze and starts for the great blue ocean. She is an object of beauty and strength, and I stand and I watch her until at length she is a speck where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone says, "There, she is gone." Gone where? Gone from my sight, that is all. She is just as large in mast and hull and spar as she was when she left my side, and she is just as able to bear her load of living weight to her destined harbor. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just at the moment when someone says, "She is gone," there are other voices ready to take up the glad shout, "Here she comes!" And that is dying.
I have copies of the sheet that Wendy just read, and if anyone feels you would like it, this little stack will be up here with seed packets of forget-me-not seeds that you're welcome to take with you on the photos and so on and so on. And, well, finally, in thanking people, I think my special gratitude goes to Drew and Chris. He's responsible for that poster. He's the one who took the photograph.
I didn't take the photo.
Oh, he took the photograph from Jane that she had mounted in her frame, and took it home with him. And I don't know exactly how he did it, but took it out and I guess had it scanned, took it to a copy service and was able to blow it up to that size. And I know many of you are probably curious about that. Drew, can you tell us how you did it?
I think I'll let Chris explain.
Okay, Chris.
He's much better at these things.
Yeah, we scanned the photo, and then Drew took it into Photoshop and did its editorial magic and helped simplify the background. And then we took it down to FedEx, and they made a poster for us.
So who did FedEx?
FedEx.
I thought they delivered things. I didn't know they did posters.
Yeah,
But they have a
do
copy
all sorts of
service.
things now. They have copy and printing services. We had the card that Drew designed, the memory card. We had that printed at FedEx too.
Oh. Well, thank you, Drew, Chris. You did a fantastic job, and they also made these smaller pictures, which are available here if you like one. There's also a guest book right beside me, and if you haven't had a chance, be sure to sign in for that guest book. And what else we have? Seen the seed packets? And we have 2 photo boards there. The one to your left was done by our neighbor in Yarnell. It's actually a lot of pictures from our friends in Yarnell, and we did a Christmas party up there as well as at our house in